And now she's draining slowly. Got all the bolts out. There tend to be different lengths, I think, sometimes. So what I did is I took the new one and just stuck the bolts in the new one where they went. This is an odd piece. It's probably one of the few things on this car that's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. It's a rather eclectic combination of 12s, 10s, and a 14. But because of how this is structured, because you can see your passages here, passage here, and it actually has a mount on the top that you have to take off before. That's a couple of 12s. You know, it's if it doesn't seal, you got a lot of work to get to it, as you can see. So they really want it to work. And none of the bolts were terribly tight, which I was glad to see. Nothing is, knock on wood, stripped out yet. And strangely, I didn't drop any of these into the bucket, so I'm on a roll. Once I got it off, I remembered why it has different bolts. The 10s actually hold it together with this back piece that has to come off and be swapped over, which is why there's two gaskets that come with the pump. When I first pulled it off, I saw this mud dauber nest under there, and it's like, how the hell did he do that? But after I saw it, it's like, okay. And you can see there's an O-ring seal that fits in there, and then your outer two just have a small gasket for that. Here's one comment. This hole is set up, as far as I can tell, that if you have something fail internally, potentially, it'll be a weeper. And you can see this channel that goes out the back side of this thing. So if you have some dripping, if there's antifreeze dripping out of the center of the front of the engine, or out of the back side of the front of the engine, if it's coming down low, it's most likely this, and that is what is going to be, basically you got to do the water pump, so while you're in there, do the timing belt. But here's something that I found that was really funny, because I don't know how this thing did this. See if we can get a picture of it. That is a Class 1 Div 1 Grade A mouse house. And you can see the O-ring on the on that. You got to pull that off. It's pretty crunchy, so this was due after 80,000 miles. But I'm going to clean that mouse house off and try to get that ready to go back together, because now we're getting down to the, now we've gotten everything disassembled basically. So now it's time to start putting her all back and making sure everything's lined up and rocking and rolling. Alright, first, that's the whole nest. Pretty good pile. I don't know. Not quite sure where that crap's coming from. Oh, yes I am. Well, maybe not. Yeah, I'll bet it's my hood liner or firewall liner back there. That's probably what it is. But anyway, I figured out how I got in. That's actually the underneath of the intake. You got your upper plenum and your lower intake manifold. So underneath the intake manifold is this gap, and that's where this water pipe comes. So he had got in there and made himself a little cozy home. Consider this thing runs at 200 or so degrees when it's running. I don't know, he built it quick. Probably when I was working on one of the other cars. But anyway, that's what you end up with once you got the whole thing off. I still need to get this gasket out of here. Yeah, it's a little cruddy. Gotta clean that off real good. Make sure everything's gonna seal when she goes back together. And then we're gonna start bolting her back up. Alright, so that's all cleaned off. Basically took a single edge razor blade and clamped it in a small pair of vice grips. Got down in there and skinned all that real good. The other thing you're gonna look at in this thing when you're putting a water pump back on, it can sometimes be a pain in the ass. The water's not gonna come out all the way. It's gonna drip from here and here. And that just, from here and from here, it's going to drip. And that's that makes it tough to get a good seal on the gasket. So what I do, because I have a compressor, is I'll just stick the air hose in one side and just blow air into one side, and that'll pressurize it enough where it'll spit it up, spit a bunch of water out of here and spit a bunch more out of here. And then when you let go, it'll be low enough, as you can see right now, that there's no water showing. And that is what I do. The drip up here doesn't matter all that much because you're going to be doing an O-ring, which, if you can see, I have pulled out using an O-ring pick. And this is the O-ring, and it is rather terrible. It is not round, it's kind of worn. It's honestly kind of surprising. It wasn't leaking, but she'd had better days. So that's something that definitely, again, when you're pulling this thing off to do a timing belt, if you don't do a water pump, you're a moron. And there she is, all cranked in, the new water pump, and you can see up here that top bracket, a couple little 12mm bolts. That's because it's the O-ring fit. It's got to hold it square on there so it can't rock back and forth under tension. But she's good, and now we're going to start getting that belt back on there. First thing we're going to do is put the tensioner idlers back on. Okay, we got the tensioners on. We're starting to get the belt put in. Here's a trick for helping you out doing dual cam or multi-cam engines. I did have to roll the back cam forward about a half a tooth to line that white mark up with the notch, like you see here. But when you put the belt on, I think I got it on about right. You got to get yourself a couple little binder clips and then do that. Just clamp the thing to the pulley. And that's going to hold your timing while you run this belt around all the rest of this crap. So that is a serious helpful thing when it comes to doing multi-cam timing belts. Another key is to make sure you have, when you get it down between here and the bottom, is that this side is tight. You don't want any slack in there, because if there is, you're off a tooth, because this is the tension side. So when that crank is spinning, it's spinning like this, which is pulling on this. So this side's always going to be tight. And if you don't have that perfect between here, where there's teeth or no gaps, and down the bottom where there's no gaps, you're gonna have a problem. You're gonna be off a tooth. The back side is not as big a deal, because it's going to be taken up by the tensioner. I'll show you down the bottom. Maybe it's a little easier to see. So that pulley, I actually had it where I had slack in here, and what I had to do is pull this forward and just hop it a tooth and then roll it around so it realigned itself all the way around. And then when the tensioner goes, that's going to tighten the whole thing up. But that front side, like I said, timing marks still aligned, timing marks up top are aligned, got front tension, should be good to put the tensioner on. Okay. Now the tensioner's in. You can see the belt is tracking pretty good. See that pin I haven't pulled out yet, but it already did push that thing up against where it's supposed to be. And when you pull that pin, that releases the tension, or releases the spring on that, so your timing belt is right where it's supposed to be. And we got good tension here, hopefully. Good tension here, a little bit of tension here, and a little bit of tension here. So we're gonna pull the binder clips off, turn this thing a couple of times, and see if the marks still line up. Well, I just ran it for a little bit, just to test it. Had to remember to put the damn crank trigger back on. Oops. But she won't start like that, so that's a good thing to know. No issues, started perfectly, smooth as silk, and no clinky clanky of stupid failing tensioners. So now I'm going to pull the damper off, start reversing the process, getting these plastic pieces of crap back on, getting the big engine hanger and all that other junk on, the AC button back up, and start putting her back together.